With just over a month to go until Oktoberfest, I thought it was time to learn a little more about Munich's beer culture and pay a visit to the Beer and Oktoberfest Museum. The museum is tucked away in the narrow Sterneckerstraße inside a historic townhouse dating back to the 14th century. The building itself is well worth a closer look, but I'll tell you more about that towards the end of the video. You buy your tickets from a machine at the entrance and then climb a steep staircase all the way up to the top floor. The museum begins where beer itself begins, with the brewing process. It explains which ingredients are needed to make Munich beer, and the recipe is remarkably short. Under the Munich Purity Law of 1487, beer was to be brewed using only barley, hops and water. That's still broadly the principle behind what is known today as the German Purity Law, also the modern rules are a little more complicated. Wheat beer is one famous exception. The Bavarian rulers granted special brewing privileges for it and eventually turned wheat beer into a lucrative monopoly. Fortunately for us, they made an exception, otherwise Bavaria might have missed out on one of its most famous beers. As much as Bavarians might like to claim beer as their own, they certainly weren't the first one to brew it. The Sumerians and ancient Egyptians were making beer thousands of years ago, and the earliest known evidence of brewing dates back to around 10,000 BC. In medieval Bavaria, monasteries became important centers of brewing. Monks brewed beer for themselves, for their guests, and later also for sale. Regulations such as the Purity Law improved the quality of beer and kept prices under control, helping it gradually replace wine as Bavaria's everyday drink. This six-pointed symbol may look like a Star of David, but in this context it's a brewer's star, the traditional guild emblem of brewers, especially in southern Germany. And when you open this chest, this is what happens. Of course not, it isn't the Ark of the Covenant. It's the guild chest of Munich's brewers, dating from 1724. The guild's most important documents and charters were kept inside. It even had 4 separate locks, with the 4 keys held by different people, so the chest could only be opened when all 4 of them were present. Behind it you can see the old guild flag. The museum also has an impressive collection of beer mugs. Here, for example, you can see different versions of the traditional Bavarian mass. In 1811, the official measure was standardized at 1.069 liters. Also, judging by the way some Maßkrüge are filled at Oktoberfest, you may not always get quite that much. Some of the mugs are far more decorative, including these 2 modeled on the towers of Munich's Frauenkirche. The museum also pays tribute to Munich's beer hall culture and to the women who helped shape it, the city's famous beer hall waitresses. Around the year 1600, Munich had no fewer than 80 breweries. Some of the names are still familiar today, such as Dürnbräu and Unionsbräu, while many others have been completely forgotten. Today, 6 major breweries are officially associated with Munich beer: Augustiner, Hacker-Pschorr, Hofbräu, Löwenbräu, Paulaner and Spaten. Also, even the number 6 is slightly misleading. Hacker-Pschorr and Paulaner belong to the same brewery group, while Löwenbräu and Spaten belong together as well. So in terms of ownership, Munich's famous 6 breweries are not quite as independent as their separate names might suggest. And after a few beers, firm footing certainly helps. That's something I can always rely on with my Giesswein shoes, even on longer walking tours around Munich. As a tour guide, I spend a lot of time on my feet, so comfortable shoes make a real difference. These shoes are light, comfortable and made with merino wool. You'll find a link in the description, and with the code Munich20 you'll receive 20% off your order. The lowest section of the museum is devoted to the history of Oktoberfest, from the royal wedding of Crown Prince Ludwig and Therese of Saxe-Hildburghausen to the festival as we know it today. Among the exhibits are ceremonial royal beer mugs, a barrel similar to the one traditionally tapped by Munich's Lord Mayor, and various other objects connected with the festival's history. And for anyone who can't visit the museum, I've already made a video about the history of Oktoberfest. You'll find a link in the top right corner. After all that theory, it was time to put some of it into practice. So after touring the museum, we sat down in the Museumsstüberl and ordered a beer. Beer tastings are also held here. Every year in the week before Oktoberfest, for example, you can sample all 6 Oktoberfest beers. And the food in the Museumsstüberl is rather good too. In the museum you really notice just how old the building is. Some of the ceilings are so low that at 2 meters tall I felt as though I had wandered into Hobbiton. You can also see the house's historic smoke kitchen here. In the Gothic parlor it is worth taking a closer look at the walls. Among the masonry you can see rounded stones collected from the river Isar. Using these readily available stones meant that the builders needed fewer of the much more expensive bricks. The wooden ceiling beams have been dated around 1340 using dendrochronology. In other words, by examining the annual growth rings in the wood. This makes the building one of the oldest surviving townhouses in Munich. By the early 1990s, however, the badly deteriorated house was in danger of being demolished or stripped of much of its historic fabric. Fortunately, it was carefully studied and restored instead, preserving a remarkable amount of its medieval structure. The Beer and Oktoberfest Museum is open Monday to Saturday from 11 AM to 7 PM. Regular admission is €4. You can visit the Museumsstüberl without buying a museum ticket. So this was the Beer and Oktoberfest Museum. I hope you enjoyed the little tour through that museum. If you want to turn the whole theory into practice, you can come here to the Museumsstüberl and try beer in practice. There's also beer testing here. And well, see you in the next video. And if you enjoyed the video, you can support the channel through my digital tip jar, find more Munich tips on my website, or even join me for a traditional Weißwurst breakfast tour. You'll find all the links in the description.